Hello, and thanks for joining Prism English.
Today, I'll tell you a story that begins with silence and ends with hope. It's not about heroes. It's not about fame. It's about a man, a letter, and a moment that changed everything. If you've ever felt alone, if you've ever stood on the edge, this story is for you. He stood on the edge of the bridge, staring down at the dark water below. No wind, no sound, just the steady hum of the city behind him and the weight of everything he had ever lost pressing against his back. His name was Thomas Hale, 53 years old, divorced, jobless, childless, and, in his mind, already gone. The note he left was short. "I'm sorry. I tried. I just don't want to be a burden anymore." He left it folded on the kitchen table, next to a half-finished cup of cold coffee and a stack of unopened bills. No one would find it for at least a few days. He lived alone. He hadn't received a call in weeks. Thomas had always been quiet, not the kind of man to cause trouble, not the kind of man anyone would call special. He worked in IT for over 25 years, saved a little, never married again after his wife left. He had a daughter once, Emily, but she stopped speaking to him after the accident. The accident. He tried not to think about it, but the memory crept in, like it always did. It was raining the day it happened. He was late picking her up from school. His phone was buzzing. Work, as always. He glanced down, just for a second. The red light, the screech, the scream. She survived, physically, but she never looked at him the same again. And eventually, she left, just like her mother. The years that followed blurred together. Days bled into nights, nights into years. He worked, ate alone, slept. Forgot birthdays, including his own. Then the company downsized. Gone. At 50, he found himself applying for jobs next to 20-somethings with sharper suits and shinier teeth. They smiled politely, thanked him for coming, and never called back. Eventually, the money ran out. Then the power. Then the will. And now, he stood here, on the bridge, coat heavy with rain, hands trembling, heart strangely calm. He closed his eyes. One step. Just one. "Don't!" A voice. Thomas turned. A young man stood a few feet away, soaked, breathless. "I'm not here to stop you," he said quickly, raising his hands. "I just saw you, and I thought maybe, before you do anything, you'd let me give you something." Thomas didn't answer. The young man reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Old, worn, sealed. "This letter isn't mine, but it changed my life, and I think maybe it's meant for someone else now." He stepped forward carefully and placed the letter on the railing beside Thomas. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Thomas stared after him, confused. The man was gone. He looked at the envelope. His hands moved before his mind did. He opened it and read. To whoever finds this. I don't know your name. I don't know your face. But if you're reading this, then maybe you're where I once was. Alone, tired, empty. And I want you to know something. I made it. I stayed. And life, somehow, gave me something back. Not all at once, not easily, but enough. Enough to laugh again. Enough to care again. Enough to want to wake up the next day. So I'm writing this to you, stranger, to tell you that pain is real, yes, but so is healing. And no matter what you've done or what's been done to you, you are not beyond repair. Please, stay just a little longer. Give life one more day. The world doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be here. The words blurred as Thomas blinked. Rain or tears, he couldn't tell. He stepped back from the edge, then one more step. Then he sat down, letter in hand, and wept. That night, Thomas didn't go home. He walked for hours with the letter in his pocket. And for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Curiosity. Who wrote it? How did the young man find it? How many lives had it passed through?
The next morning, Thomas sat at the same kitchen table where his goodbye note had once rested. But now, beside the cold coffee rug, there was another piece of paper, folded carefully, worn at the edges. The letter. He had read it 4 times through the night. Not just read, absorbed it. He had clung to every word like a lifeline. He didn't know why it mattered so much. Maybe because it was written for someone like him. Maybe because it was the first voice in years that didn't sound like judgment or pity. He looked again at the envelope. No return address, no signature. Just one sentence scribbled faintly on the back. Leave this where it's needed next. Thomas wasn't sure what that meant, but he knew one thing. He couldn't ignore it. He started by returning to the bridge. Same place, same time, but no young man, no sign. He asked a coffee vendor nearby if he'd seen anyone last night. The man shook his head. But another vendor, an older woman in a blue coat, overheard and said, "You mean that tall kid with the backpack? He's always handing things out to strangers. Notes, flyers, books sometimes." Thomas's heart jumped. "Do you know his name?" "No, but he's got one of those free library boxes across town. You know, where people drop books for others to take." She scribbled an address on a napkin. That afternoon, Thomas made the trip, 3 buses and a long walk. And there it was, a small wooden box outside a church, painted red and covered in raindrops. Inside were old novels, children's books, a few pamphlets, and taped to the side a note. "Don't have money? Take a book anyway. Feeling lost? Look under the bottom shelf." He did. And there, beneath the books, was another envelope. Different handwriting, different message, but same purpose. Another letter of hope. Thomas read it slowly. This one was signed, just a first name, Ava. And for the first time, the fog in his mind began to shift into clarity. This was a network, a chain of letters passed from one person to another, anonymous, untied to any religion or organization, just kindness in ink. He took a picture of the letter, then put it back exactly where he found it. And that night, for the first time in years, he wrote something. To the next person who finds this, I stood on a bridge last night and thought the world was done with me. But someone gave me a letter that changed that. Maybe this one will do the same for you. We've never met. We probably never will. But I want you to know, you matter, even if it feels like you don't. Especially if it feels like you don't. Please, stay. You are not alone even when you feel most lost. T.H. He folded the page, placed it in an envelope, and under the same note on the library box, he slipped it into the hidden shelf. The next day he returned. The letter was gone. In its place, a different one, new handwriting. It began, "Thank you, whoever you are. I was having a terrible day." Days turned into weeks. Thomas no longer slept in. He volunteered twice a week at the church nearby, washing dishes, fixing broken computers. He told no one about the bridge or the letter. But inside, something had changed. It wasn't a miracle. The bills were still there. The silence in his apartment still echoed. But the heaviness had lifted just enough for him to move again. One morning, as he was sweeping the church hallway, a voice behind him said, "You came back." Thomas turned. It was the young man from the bridge. Same eyes, same calm, slightly awkward smile. "You gave me the letter." "I didn't write it," the man said quickly. "Someone gave it to me a year ago. I kept it, thought I might need it again one day." He paused. "But I didn't. Not because life got easier, but because I realized we don't always need answers. Sometimes we just need to feel less alone." Thomas looked down, swallowed. "Do you know where it came from? Who started all this?" The man smiled. "There's a rumor, but I'm not sure if it's real. People say there was a woman decades ago who lost her son to suicide. And after that, she started leaving notes in random places. Bus stops, laundromats, restrooms. No one knew who she was, but people began copying her. It spread." Thomas blinked. "Do you believe that?" The man shrugged. "I don't need to. The letters are real. That's enough." They stood in silence for a while. Then Thomas said, "What's your name?" "Micah." Thomas held out his hand. "Thank you, Micah." Micah shook it, firm, warm. "You'll know when it's time to pass it on," he said, then walked away. That night, Thomas returned to the bridge, not to jump, but to sit. He held the letter again, the one that Micah had given him, the one that had once saved him, and he smiled, because now he understood. The letter didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to the next soul standing at the edge, waiting for a reason to step back.
Spring came quietly that year. The city warmed, trees bloomed along the sidewalks, and the church garden, the one no one had touched in years, slowly came back to life. Thomas had asked the pastor if he could tend to it. He didn't know much about flowers, but he knew what it felt like to be ignored. And somehow, pulling weeds, touching soil, felt like something returning. He began planting small things, herbs, bright petals, and a wooden sign that read, "Still growing." Every Wednesday morning, someone left a letter under the sign, anonymous, handwritten, kind. And every Friday, Thomas would reply, not with advice, not with solutions, just presence, someone who listened. It became a ritual, unspoken, untraceable, sacred. Until one day he found something different. Not a letter, a notebook. Plain brown cover, no title. Inside, a message. "Dear gardener, I don't know who you are, but your words have kept me alive these past months. So here's mine, my story. If you still have the strength to read one more heart, this is mine." Thomas sat down on the bench under the blooming tree, and he read. The story inside was raw, sharp, beautiful. It belonged to a woman in her late 20s, lost, broken, trying to survive grief. Her name was M. Thomas froze when he saw it. M. No last name, but the writing style, the way she described certain details, it rang in his bones. She wrote about losing her father, not to death, but to silence, to guilt, to fear, to an accident that neither of them survived emotionally. Thomas's hands shook. He turned the page, then another, then another. By the end, he couldn't breathe, because it wasn't just any woman. It was her, his daughter, Emily. He hadn't seen her in over 10 years. She'd been a teenager the last time they spoke, her eyes full of fire, pain, accusation. He remembered every word she screamed. And now she was writing to him, not knowing he was the one reading. He closed the notebook gently, sat in the garden as the sky turned from gold to gray. He didn't know what to do. Say nothing? Write back as a stranger? He wanted to run, but he didn't. Instead, he went home and wrote a letter. Not for the next stranger, but for the girl he once carried on his shoulders through the park. Dear M, you don't know me. Or maybe you do. I once hurt someone very badly, not with intention, but with absence. I thought that staying silent was better than causing more pain, but I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect, it poisons. There hasn't been a single day I didn't wish I could go back and be braver, or softer, or more present. But since I can't, I'm trying something else, being here, today, now. You're not alone, M. Not anymore. With hope, a gardener who's still learning how to grow things again. He placed the letter in the notebook, left it under the tree the next morning, and waited. 3 days passed, nothing. Then, on the 4th morning, the notebook was gone, and in its place a white envelope. He opened it. One sentence. If it's you, meet me at the garden, Friday, 10 a.m. Friday. He arrived early. The bench was empty. Birds chirped overhead. Nervousness twisted in his stomach like a rope. Then footsteps. He turned. There she was. Grown now, strong, tired, but beautiful. Emily. She stopped a few feet away. Neither of them spoke for what felt like a lifetime. Then, "Did you really read all of it?" she asked. Thomas nodded. "I almost stopped halfway. Didn't think anyone would care." "I did," he said softly. "I do." She sat on the bench, eyes avoiding his. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "I didn't think I deserved to," he replied. Silence. Then she looked up. "The letter you left, it sounded like the father I used to remember." Thomas's voice cracked. "That's the one I've been trying to find again." She nodded slowly. "I'm not ready to forgive everything." "You don't have to," he whispered. She looked around the garden. "Still growing, huh?" He smiled. "Some roots take longer than others." She looked back at him, eyes shimmering. "Maybe I'll come help next week." He said nothing, just nodded once. And somehow, that was enough.
Spring passed. Emily began visiting every week, at first just to water plants, then to bring tea, then to stay for hours. She and Thomas didn't talk about the past often. They didn't need to. They planted together, read quietly in the same garden, sometimes wrote letters, not to anyone specific, just to let feelings breathe. And that, somehow, was healing. One morning, Thomas returned to the garden and found a boy sitting on the bench. 17, maybe 18, slouched shoulders, distant stare. Thomas recognized that look. He approached slowly. "You okay?" The boy didn't respond at first. Then, without turning, he asked, "You're the one who writes the letters?" Thomas hesitated. "Sometimes." He held up a folded paper, one of the older ones Thomas had left in the library box months ago. "I found this yesterday. I wasn't looking for it, it was there." He unfolded it. It was the one Thomas had written after surviving the bridge. "I stood on a bridge and thought the world was done with me." His hands trembled. "I was on a rooftop. Had my phone in my pocket. I was going to text my mom goodbye, but I didn't know what to say. Then I read this." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "Are you really the one who wrote it?" Thomas nodded. The boy swallowed hard. "I didn't jump." Thomas sat beside him. "I'm glad." Silence again. Then the boy asked, "Why did you write it?" Thomas looked at the sky. "Because someone once gave me a letter too, on a night when I almost didn't make it." The boy blinked. "You mean this saved you?" Thomas smiled gently. "Yes. And now it saved you. So maybe you'll know when it's your turn to pass it on." The boy wiped his face. "How do you know when?" Thomas answered, "You'll feel it, like a heartbeat that isn't yours, a voice that says, 'Don't walk away just yet.'" The boy nodded, and for the first time, smiled. He stood up. "Thank you." Thomas didn't stop him, didn't ask his name, because the letter had done its job, and now it would keep moving. Weeks later, Thomas and Emily walked through the old part of town where time seemed slower and air softer. They passed a bus stop where someone had taped a small piece of paper to the pole. He paused. Emily read out loud. "Dear you, I don't know your name, but I believe you're here for a reason. And if today feels too heavy, know that you're not alone. Stay, just for one more sunrise." She looked at Thomas. He just smiled. The letter had found another wall, another bridge, another heart. It was alive. 2 years passed. Thomas still tended the garden, still wrote letters, still answered the ones left under the old tree. Emily began organizing community writing workshops, letters to strangers, where people could share anonymous stories of survival. One day, a news outlet covered their work. Then a podcast picked it up. Then a nonprofit offered to fund a program to spread the letter project worldwide. Thomas declined the spotlight. Instead, he printed 1,000 blank envelopes. On the front of each, just one phrase: "To someone who needs to hear this." He never knew where most of them ended up. But once he was riding a train across the city. An older woman sat beside him reading a letter with tears running down her cheeks. He didn't say anything, but he smiled, because somehow the letter always found its way. As the screen fades to soft light and music swells, a gentle voice reads, "To whoever finds this, I was once where you are, tired, afraid, ready to give up. But someone left a letter for me, and in that letter I found a reason to stay, even if just for one more night. So now I leave this for you, not as a solution, not as advice, but as a hand reaching through the dark. Please stay, just long enough for hope to catch up."
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Prism English. We'll see you next time, where English isn't just learned, it's lived.